Science has proven time and time again to be a wildly successful approach to obtaining knowledge. Many interesting and important observations were made before the formalization of the scientific method, but it's hard to argue that the practice of science doesn't have some sort of intimate relationship with truth. I mean, yes, people still do argue that, using computers, which is just really supremely frustrating. Astrology, alchemy, numerology, phrenology, a whole slew of weird stuff that's supposedly good for your health. There's no shortage of disciplines which people claim are as good as, or even better than, mainstream science like physics or medicine at prediction and accessing truth. I mean, we've got evidence that science is really, really good at finding stuff out, and so we want to believe in things that are scientifically justified. But how are we supposed to separate them from all the pretenders? Differentiating science and pseudoscience is a philosophical and a practical concern called the demarcation problem. We have sort of an intuitive sense of what science and pseudoscience are, but trying to make a hard and fast rule to separate one from the other is actually kind of tricky. Sir Karl Popper, a truly prolific 20th century philosopher with some really impressive earlobes, took a stab at the demarcation problem using a principle that he called falsificationism. For Popper, the main thing that separates science from non-science, or pseudoscience, was an emphasis on strict falsifiability. A scientific claim was one which staked its entire reputation on the fact that you might observe something in the world which would totally disprove it, but you never will. Popper chose Sigmund Freud's theory of psychoanalysis as a sort of punching bag of pseudoscience. He said that one might be led to the mistaken conclusion that it was a fantastic theory because it could never really be proven wrong. After all, any human behavior whatsoever could be explained as some combination of id, ego, and superego. There are some problems with Popper's criteria that we'll get to in a second, but it is an exceptionally poignant observation, and it does cross a whole lot of stuff off of the list. Like, psychics might claim to be able to predict the future, but they never really pin their entire professional reputations on singular predictions. If they get something right, then it's because they're psychic. If they get something wrong, it's only because reading tarot cards is really hard, guys. Falsificationism does a lot for advancing the enterprise of demarcation. And, as a bonus, it turns the problem of induction on its head. After all, if science is only in the enterprise of disproving the theories that can't be true and keeping everything else open as a possibility, then there's no induction going on, only deduction. But, as I said, there are a few problems with Popper's position. First, it can be interpreted in a way that excludes a whole lot of stuff that we normally think of as science. I mean, Popper himself originally thought that the theory of natural selection wasn't falsifiable, because it kind of sounds like an untestable tautology, like saying, survivors survive. He later retracted this view after being shown the empirical tests that had been done on natural selection, revising his statement to say that it was only very hard to test. But he had sort of demonstrated that dismissing something because it seems unfalsifiable can be kind of subjective. Second, and perhaps more importantly, most scientists don't really think that way. I mean, positive results bias aside, there are an awful lot of scientific papers that make positive claims that something is causally linked to something else. Either there's an unspoken assumption among all scientists that those are just possibilities that haven't been disproven yet, or there's something else going on here. Despite those significant objections, Popper's insight in falsificationism kicked off a whole bunch of inquiry into the philosophy of science, including the demarcation problem.